we talked about ADHD a lot.
Yes.
And can I say that you just had your diploma?
Yes, you can say that.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah, I just did.
I just got
Uh,
my ADHD diploma. Yes.
yeah, right. So it's kind of interesting because because you just shared it with me, but and then
Mhm.
we went into this whole ADHD kind of story, which is so relevant on different levels because it's also about neurodiversity or
Mhm.
neurospiciness,
Mhm.
which I like. And at the same time, I always keep thinking like, who isn't? I mean, but that's the bubble I live in. I live in the bubble of, everyone has some kind of a label, whether they know it or
Mm.
not. Like, I have dyslexia, my daughter. I think with my son, he doesn't have dyslexia. He reads books at night and
Mhm.
when he goes to sleep and go like, he's still reading. Like,
Oh,
what's
I
wrong
love
with
that.
you? What's wrong with you?
I don't
Like,
understand.
yeah, it's like, what are you, normal? How weird is that? Right? So there's no, but I think everybody, this, we all go through this life and through this world where we have to cope.
Mhm.
Everybody's insecure. At least I think so. At least I've never met someone who wasn't insecure at some level. Doesn't mean you can be comfortable with, but we're all searching. We're all looking. We're all kind
Yeah,
of,
absolutely.
right, right. So I don't know. It's interesting how, things like ADHD,
Mhm.
all of a sudden, they're all around me as well, right? So it's
Yeah.
not just you, but it's other
Not just
people
me,
too.
a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
how
I
did you
think,
how did you look at that?
well, and that was one of the signs that kind of made me realize it may be an element, yeah, it may be something that I'm dealing with, is because I realized that all of my favorite authors, all of my favorite musicians, all of, or not all, but most of my friends or people that I get on with really quickly, I would then go on to discover that they are neurodiverse in some way.
Mm,
Dyslexia, ADHD, autism, high giftedness, whatever it is,
right.
there's something else going on there. And I was like, oh, but if I get on so well with these people. And
I
so, yeah,
always thought it was a sense. I always thought it was humor. It's kind of, but maybe sense of humor is also kind of connected to that as well.
I think so, because humor is a lot about making unexpected connections,
Right.
right? If
Interesting.
your brain is wired differently, then
Yeah.
it's easier for you to find those connections.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So being wired differently, which also is like something I say that a lot,
Mhm.
right? But then I'm thinking, what do I actually know what I'm saying when I'm saying wired differently? I mean, I know, I mean, I've been reading about this. Obviously, I'm not a neuroscientist, obviously. So,
Lord help us. Yeah.
yeah, it would have, Lord help us. Yeah, exactly. That would be horrible. I actually, oh my God, I would never stop talking. Oh boy, yeah. Because but I read about this, but then you go like, I mean, because it's literally your your neural connections
Mhm.
are different, but it's such a simple thing to say, and it's probably way more complicated than that. It's never that simple,
No.
because aren't we? Because then I go like, we all went through different experiences, through life. We all have different stories. So
Mhm.
aren't we all wired differently? No one is the wired.
Oh,
I mean, aren't we all wired differently? Aren't we? Anyway,
I think
that's how I go.
science would say yes to some
All
extent.
right, good. Thank you.
But yeah, I guess it comes down to nurture versus nature. Yeah.
Well, both, right? It's
Yeah.
both. I mean, we
Yeah.
know that it's both. I mean, your brain changes continuously every time you learn something new.
Hmm.
It's a continuous thing. It's always moving, and it's shaped by your experiences. And yes, there's nurture and there's nature, but there's also, if you you've been exposed to music throughout your life, you're wired differently.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
true.
someone who's a musician is wired differently than the person who's not a musician, but is really good at, well, I don't know, driving cars really fast. Something very useful. Right. So, I mean, they're wired differently. So now I'm just, right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just the whole idea of, yeah, you have ADHD, so you're wired differently. So you see things different. But if you're really good at driving a car really fast,
Hmm.
you're, you're
your wiring for danger is very different than mine.
Right, you'll
Yeah.
see things differently. No, but I mean, you'll
Mhm.
see things differently in a different way than the people who are, painters.
Mhm.
For instance, they'll see things differently as well. Or where you own a business, you see things differently as well.
Yeah.
So I,
Yeah.
I just don't want to kind of categorize people in sort of like people who see things differently and people who see things normally or something, right?
Normally, yeah. What is even that? Yeah.
Yeah, because diversity is more than inviting people with a diploma of HD, like a badge of honor, like going, we need some crazy people, right? Because that's the danger that you go like, that's the danger of labels, right? So
Yeah.
where you go like,
Yeah.
okay, because you're not. And Anika was someone who was successful, and because she can
Mhm.
cope with the systems, that she works in, and she's,
Mhm.
she's
Mhm.
a really
Very successful.
right? She's a successful person. So it's not like she doesn't fit in. She does fit in, right? And so that was kind of interesting, sort of as a thought, like, yeah, what are we talking about?
Yeah, I'd say she succeeded in the system, but she didn't fit in. She said she always felt like an outsider.
Yeah,
So
but
that's also an interesting duality.
that's why she fitted in so well into what she's doing, because she brings something special to the
Mhm.
table. But then again, my thinking goes like, yeah, but aren't we all wired differently? So don't we all bring something different to the table if you allow people to?
Yeah, yeah. Maybe it's just a gross oversimplification. Say, oh yeah, I'm wired differently to help explain it to people that maybe don't want to go as in depth. Like, okay, you
Yeah,
have ADHD. What does that mean? Ah, yeah, well, I'm wired differently. Things that make sense to you don't make sense to me. My ability to estimate time or be on time is
yeah,
probably very different than yours. Stuff like
yeah.
this. Yeah.
But then your ADHD and her ADHD is very different.
Very true. Yeah. Yeah.
So I was expecting you two to be exactly the same because you have the same diploma, but you are clearly not, and that makes no sense to
You're
me.
different
Like
people.
you both have ADHD. Why aren't you the same? Right. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
because you are a different person.
Yeah. Have human experiences. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so my takeaway was sort of, oh, yeah. So we've had more conversations that left me with so many questions or just kind of like also like, oh, I have to read up on this and
Mhm.
I know. So I think I learned a lot and I love the stories and there were so many more because when
Yeah,
we stopped recording.
and we didn't just talk about neurodiversity. We also talked about AI and ethics of
Exactly.
AI, which
Yeah.
is one of her huge passions
Yeah,
in life.
scary AI, but also the sense of what was it? Righteousness, or the sense of what is
Like
honest, what is
justice.
justice, sorry,
Hmm.
justice, sense of
Hmm.
justice,
Yeah, which she mentioned is tied to ADHD,
Yeah,
having this sense of justice. Yeah.
yeah. Interesting. I didn't know that, by the way, but it's interesting that
Yeah.
it's tied to ADHD. But sense of, yeah, so but it's kind of if you then yeah, if you look at AI and all the biases that are
Hmm.
kind of you know and we talk yeah, so she talked about ethical debt. I'm not going to explain that. That's in the podcast. You have to listen to.
She explains it. Yeah. But it's a
Yeah,
very cool
ethical
concept I
debt.
had never thought of before, but makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. A lot of things that I never thought about before. So it was like, oh, so,
Yeah. A little overwhelming, but in a good way. Yeah.
yeah, totally.
But
Yeah,
she's really, I've talked to her before and she's very, very intelligent, but also very inspiring and very easy to talk to. And that's always a really brilliant sign of somebody who knows a lot about an overwhelming topic to me. Because AI kind of baffles me sometimes, and I definitely don't understand it that well. But she's able to explain things in a very easy to understand way.
yes.
Yeah. Well, that's Annika Madejska.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You will listen to the interview.
Yes. Good idea.
Okay. All right.
Enjoy.
Enjoy.
Fun thing, I showed up to a customer meeting once looking like a potato. Uh,
I didn't realize there were avatars. This is
oh, there exist. You can get new eyebrows and everything, but
Yeah.
portrait, yes, it was on.
Yeah. See. Yeah.
There
That's
we go.
ah.
It
yeah.
just it really distracted me with
Sure.
when
Yeah.
my flowers were like blinking, and I'm like, this is weird and it's going to distract me. I have ADHD, so
Oh,
I
Join the club.
weird things blinking make me go, I can't focus on anything else. I'm now going to see only my flashing flowers. Yeah.
now I feel like I'm the only one not with ADHD, and so I should have that. But I'm not sure yet because Morgan just got their
I just got diagnosed. Yeah.
diploma.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I got diagnosed right after the pandemic. So I'm also like kind of a late in life diagnosed person, but God, it explains so much.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes. Yes.
hmm,
And
no,
Arna, if you don't have it,
I'm
you're
oddly,
definitely
huh?
ADHD adjacent. So
Yeah, I'm oddly jealous now. I don't know why. That's not supposed to happen, right? You go like, no, wait a minute. I have this like, yeah, it's fine. I'm fine with the one thing. I'll stick with that. Yeah, but of course, yeah. But it's okay. Hang on.
Yes.
Wait,
Here we go.
we're gonna
Okay.
talk about something else. No, or
The
not. I mean, because I think it's
Or
all
not.
connected. Well, it is. I mean,
Yeah.
these things are connected.
Of
Obviously, they're
course.
connected. And one of
Yeah.
the things we really, really did find in all the conversations we had, and so this is like our.
Mhm.
So we have 60 or
Almost
something,
70.
almost 70
Oh, wow.
interviews,
Yeah.
and we haven't found a normal person yet. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's not going to be this one either.
Yeah, well, we found one, but it's
There's
just,
one. Yeah.
yeah, we found people who thought they were normal. We found those as well, but in the end, we were like, no.
I
Yeah,
have never in my life felt that I normal, if by normal you say fitting into society's expectations.
right.
Um,
Yeah. What is I mean, that's interesting with language, right?
yeah,
What is normal? Because I mean, yeah, because I
it
think, yeah, what is that?
I actually I'm wearing a bracelet. It looks like a medical bracelet. My colleagues have told me that I'm going to be so unlucky one day if anything happens because they will actually think it is a medical bracelet. But it actually says in it's in Swedish, so I'm going to translate. You are the weird ones. I'm the normal one.
So when they take you to the
Just
hospital, they start kind of scanning the thing and they go like, what does it say? And they're like, wait a minute.
exactly.
She
Like,
clearly needs help.
yeah,
She's in the hospital, but we're
Yes.
the weird ones.
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
Nice. It's a good
Exactly.
reminder. Yeah. It's all
Yeah.
just
Hmm.
how you look at it. Yeah.
Morgan, you wanna
Kick
ask
us
the first
off?
question and kick us off?
Sure.
Yes.
Yes. So besides weird, if someone met you and they said, we know you, or rather we know your CV and we know all of your professional accomplishments, but we don't know who you are.
Mm.
Who is Anika? What would you say?
Oh wow. I think that I always kind of describe myself as the constant immigrant, misfit, quirky, but these days, having come to a point in life when I am no longer a spring chicken, I kind of just feel that I'm a human who dares to be who I am, I guess. On the outside as well as on the inside, I have deliberately stopped masking sides of myself that I might have hidden in the past, but I am no longer willing to compromise on who I am to fit into what society might feel is normal.
Mm.
So I guess yeah, that's me.
That's a
When did that start? That awareness of that you're not sort of not fitting in.
Already as a child, I remember that I
Mm.
was much more comfortable with, but I have two sisters. They are 8 and 10 years older than me. I was much more comfortable with older people than children my own age. I think I often felt that I was misunderstood by those who were the same age as me, looking at life a little bit kind of like an outsider from the inside, because yeah, I was in the group, but I constantly kind of felt like I was a spectator, slightly on the boundaries looking in.
Yeah. And when, because you said that you were that you may have masked or hidden those elements of yourself before, was there a catalyst moment or realization that you had that you're like, okay, I've been hiding this part of myself, but I'm going to be brave enough and share that with
So
the
I think that
world?
there are two moments. When I was going to like senior high, kind of the 2, 3 years in between going to school and then to university, I actually moved away from home. I was 16, but I chose to go to a senior high school that was directed at art. So, and that was only at that point in time in Sweden, it only existed in like 5 places in all of Sweden. So if I wanted to go to that school, I had to move away from home. And I talked my parents into it. They were completely against it first, because I mean, who in their right mind lets a 16-year-old move away from home? But then we went to visit the school and we returned, and my mom was like, "That's it, you're not going anywhere else. You're going to this school." Uh, and I'm not going to say it was easy, but since I was in an environment with artistic teenagers, uh, I, it was kind of expected almost from us to be a bit weird and quirky, because it's the artsy ones. So that was kind of liberating. I mean, these are the years in our lives when I think it is the hardest to not fit in.
Right.
So, but I would say that I was even perhaps a bit too quirky for the art
Oh,
That is
wow.
impressive.
But so during that time, I kind of felt that I could be myself. But then later on in life, I guess I went through a lot of different phases and everything. But then when I did the a big transition of professions from being a journalist to becoming a designer, I also ended up in an environment, actually the current company that I work for, that is an absolute treasure trove of inclusiveness and unity, in a manner where it is completely okay to be yourself. So I think that that was kind of the second time that I just went, nah, now I'm too old to even try to write anything from anyone. I am who I am, and you have to take it as it is, with flowers and everything.
So I'm just curious about, because what you're saying about even for the art people, you were too quirky. What do you, what were you doing? No, I mean,
What did I do?
was,
I don't think I was doing that. So having already been neuro-spicy at that point, not knowing that I am neuro-spicy, I hyper focused on things that interested me, which
mm,
might have looked like weird to other people, even other artsy people who were quirky themselves. But this one was just a little bit extra.
ah, they were like, wait a minute.
Yes.
Give us,
Wait a second.
can you give us a snapshot of like 16-year-old hyper-focused art school student you? Like,
Oh wow. Oh, I was goth at that time, by the way, not colorful at all black and dark purple hair. And I was really into different filters on my camera, film camera still. We did all of these cool things where we could develop the film and everything in our studio at the school. So, and I was really obsessed with photography and different filters and like macros and all of that. And playing around in the lab, trying out different methods of developing images and getting effects without having all of the tools that we currently have. I mean, I think that we got Photoshop at this school my last year there. So I was like kind of really diving into all of that with all of these manual tools, like analog tools that we had back then.
Really
That's
cool.
awesome. Yeah.
Really cool.
So my first job was a photographer, and obviously also in the days of film. And I always felt that for me, photography was more of a sort of, I don't know how to explain it. So I didn't really like developing. So we work with the chemicals and all that. I didn't have the patience for that. And I was like, yeah. So right now, now it's perfect to be a photographer for me, at least, because it's so quick and I don't have to go into these dark rooms. But one thing I did also like is that as a photographer, you are also a little bit of an outsider
Mm-hmm.
because you're the photographer and you are observing and sort of you are it is a bit of a literally focus, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
being hyper focused as a photographer. That's kind of cool, but you're also outside. So, I've always had a bit, that's kind of part of dyslexia. I learned later in life that you have a problem acting the way other people do. They're all normal and in groups and all that. And I always felt a little bit on the outside. But as a photographer, I could be both part of it, but also
Mm.
I had like
Mm-hmm.
friends of mine, they are like, they would be like DJs. So they can go to a party, but they didn't have to talk to anyone. So for me, that's photography. Like I can be at the group, I can be at the party. I don't have to talk it because I have the camera in my hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sort of so that's sort of a way of finding sort of a focus or something very specific
Mm-hmm.
to
A camera can also be a filter between you and the reality that sort of
right.
protects you a bit.
Hmm. Yeah.
Mm.
And this was something that when I was studying to become a journalist, I wrote my thesis on journalists covering large crises like accidents and natural disasters and such. And that was again still at the time when we didn't really think that much about the psychological side of
Mm.
this. And within the
Mhm.
journalistic profession, there was a big problem with alcoholism. And this was in part because you never really had a custom of thinking about that whatever you saw or whatever you covered could affect you as a human because you were up there doing your job.
Mm.
And in the interviews I did with journalists who had been covering really, really big and awful things, one of the things that came out was that all of them, as it was ongoing, they were just fine. It was those moments when they came home and
Mm.
relaxed that they were no longer fine because out in the field, the camera is the filter, it protects you. As a journalist, it was the notepad
Mm.
Right.
or the microphone.
Hmm.
But then when you come home, you are a human and you're still a human who, with that filter shielding you at the time, you still saw all of these awful things. And back then, we knew that we have to debrief first responders, but nobody thought about the journalists that saw the exact same things
Yeah.
as the first responders.
Yeah.
And that also made me think much, much more about what tools we kind of keep in front of us professionally that kind of provides detachment for us,
Hmm.
so to
Mm.
speak. And I think we also have that as both facilitators and designers. There are tools we can utilize that kind of separates us from situations as well
Hmm.
and are helpful for us in performing our jobs. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I know that's a really interesting thought. There's things that are kind of really, because sometimes, you need to kind of remove yourself. You can't have all the empathy that you might have
Mm,
otherwise for whatever the people that you're,
mm,
you know, observing and taking photo. If you're a photographer in the war, my great grandfather was actually a police photographer,
mm,
mm, and he was totally screwed up. Really, because he was basically,
mm,
when there was a murder or something, he would come in and make photos of
Yeah.
the crime
Yeah.
scene, right? And he was really not okay.
Oh.
But
mm,
he had no nobody, there was nobody who took care of him or anything. There wasn't
mm.
no psychologist or no one kind of,
Mhm.
right?
No,
So
that's that generation that never had it.
Yeah.
We're kind of in the first generation where it became an awareness that these people see awful things, and perhaps that actually affects them, and they
Yeah.
might need help dealing with what they saw. And
Yeah.
especially for journalists and for first responders that perhaps in that past time was also more predominantly male. It was also,
Mm.
a real man does not, cry or, admit that it was hard. You just suck it up. And that's kind of also where the whole issue with treating it with alcohol instead came in.
Very
Yeah.
socially acceptable, yeah, tool. Yeah.
Mm, mm,
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
mm.
And
So,
I'm thinking of that, like, as I'm a teacher. And so I'm not on the front lines. I'm not dealing with horrific stuff, but I'm trying to think if that also applies to me today. Am I using a specific tool, or do we in the profession? And it's very interesting because I just had a conversation a few hours ago with a colleague, and we're trying to assign people to different tasks. And we're like, but this colleague has a lot of empathy. I don't know if they're suited for this task, because you need a bit less empathy or else it's going to. And
Yeah.
that was kind of a weird thing. Like, too much empathy is a problem in this situation, which doesn't
Oh,
seem
yeah.
doesn't seem right.
Yeah, no, like usually we like to think that empathy is all over a great thing, but I think we need to be able to dial that down, and that is also a skill. And some people can dial it down, and some are worse at it. I'm
Mm.
still learning. Sometimes I manage, sometimes I really don't. And I kind of think that that is also part of my neurospiciness. I found out that, for instance, in people with ADHD, that we like we have this innate need for justice. And it
Yes.
kind of, like, when I read that, I was like, okay, that explains my entire life. It explains my career choices. It explains
oh,
all of the times when I've gotten myself into trouble sticking up for other people.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah.
It was only a few months ago, because I would get so frustrated when other people wouldn't operate under the same kind of mindset, I
Oh, it's
guess.
infuriating.
And it was only a few months ago that I got it, and I was like, oh wait, not everybody has this same drive for justness or correctness that I do
Mhm.
sometimes, and that's causes me friction.
Yeah. Yeah. And the whole issue with, yeah, what is justice to begin with? Because you always come from your own point of view, and you might not consider all of the other perspectives, especially not when you get all fired up about it. And it would be helpful to be able to dial down that empathy at those particular times, perhaps, and perhaps be able to see more of all of the other points of view in that moment. But yeah, working on it.
Yeah, it reminds me
mm,
of the movie Inside Out. Have you seen it?
No, I
So
haven't.
it's delightful. It's a Pixar film, but basically they show this character and how her emotions impact her life, but the emotions become this little control center. So there's one
All
big
right.
motherboard with all these dials and knobs and controls, and then each of the different emotions is busy trying to do things based on the situation, but it gives a
Yeah,
really
mine
nice
are running
visual.
rampant. Yeah.
Yeah.
so it's so interesting because I mean, we just in the beginning of the conversation we talked about this, but that all the people we spoke to, and obviously there's a little bit of a bias, I guess, for us because I will kind of, I know the people I know, you, Morgan, you know the people
Mhm.
you know, so it's our kind of our community. So I think it's kind of, these are the like-minded people that kind of, so which is also interesting, by the way, because somehow you kind of connect to the kind of people that are a little bit more like you. So,
Mm.
so there's a bit of that, but at the same time, there's quite a big group of people that we've been interviewing. And I think a lot of them they might not all say or know there's ADHD or something like that, or being neurospicy. Neurospicy came up a couple of times, which I kind of like. But but at the same time, I think all of them felt especially when they were young, that they didn't fit in.
Mhm.
Right? All of them somehow felt they didn't fit in. And I don't know if there's been any research on this, but I mean, not fitting, obviously when you're a teenager, like, I have two at home. And not fitting in is a huge problem. You want to fit in
Mm,
somehow, somewhere, right? So that's
mm,
such a huge thing. And so it's not, I mean, you don't have to have ADHD or something to kind of have that feeling. You can just be completely normal
Mhm.
teenager with
oh
no
yes, of
labels
course. I
and
mean,
still,
it's human to want
right?
to belong and fit in.
Absolutely. So how, I mean, but if there's so when you are kind of, when there's more than you're, right, when there are things going on like ADHD, and especially if you don't know it, right? So if you know
Mhm.
this as a kid, if you're diagnosed as a kid, so I was diagnosed with dyslexia as a kid. So for me, it was always like, again, I could say, oh no, I have dyslexia. So it's all good. I had this evidence that it was okay for me not to fit in
Mm,
because I had something that other kids, or, as far as I could tell, did not have. But if you don't know that, you can be, I mean, you can be extremely insecure because even
mm.
because you have more problems fitting in. So how would you do sort of, I mean, how did that go for you? I mean, were you is that creating a, because in a way
Oh,
you're,
horrendously insecure, awfully insecure, people pleaser,
but how does that work? So
definitely.
so so how does that work? Because this is sort of the confusion that people who would probably have known you, for instance, at the art school, they would have known you as someone who didn't give a damn because you were hyper focused on
Mhm.
stuff that everybody was going like, is she crazy? What's going on? We were the crazy bunch, and now she came in, and now all of a sudden we're not we're not crazy enough. What's happening? Right. And then but then you're really insecure, and that doesn't fit because it seems
Yeah,
like
no.
you're not a pleaser at all in the way you do things. So
Yeah.
how does that work? Because that can be confusing for the people on the outside who will
Oh,
then judge you.
it's confusing for me too. Of like just like a few weeks ago, one of the my younger colleagues said, "Oh, I can stand here next to you because you're so strong," and I'm like, "But I'm not."
But you are. Yeah, no, no, no,
Eh,
exactly. That's like,
Yes,
because yes,
yeah,
because they think you are, and they have the evidence
yeah,
because they
and
see
and
what you
that
do.
and the perception of myself is just so different from within, sort of, than it is from the outside. I'm very hard on myself. I'm one of those like really, really terrible overachievers. Never satisfied with anything. I can always do better. So I think that that was also one of the ways that it was a strategy of mine. Also, perhaps because
Mm.
I did not know that I had ADHD, and as women, we are very much taught that we should be good girls and we should, get good grades and so on and so forth. So when it was a bit of a chaos in my head, I had to find strategies to still be a very kind of good girl, so to speak. I became very good at it. Looking from the outside in, I don't think that I am one of those people that would immediately be labeled with any kind of neurospiciness whatsoever. And I think that that is actually the clue to how I, in the end, went. Perhaps I should go and see if there is something here because it was the pandemic and I was really, really frustrated being like locked up in a house in the countryside, far, far away from my family. My family lives in Sweden. I live in Finland. Of course, with my husband, and he's awesome. But after like a year and a half in the house, kind of craved, some interaction with other people. I was digging in right outside the door. We have this herbal garden, and I had decided that I'm going to completely overhaul it. So I was out there digging, and I had my phone on with just, random podcasts about life. And there was this woman, a Swedish doctor, a surgeon, super accomplished. And she was talking about how she found out that she has ADHD. And it was like she spoke about my life,
Mm.
because I am a successful professional. I've always managed my professional life perfectly. But in the head, it's been utter chaos. And then, of course, I mean, perhaps more of that chaos is visible in my private life than it is in my professional life. So I think that that kind of was what made me want to see if there is something to it. Not necessarily because I was in need of getting a diagnosis or anything, because I was managing life perfectly fine, even better than fine, some would argue. So I did go in with the whole kind of attitude of, if there is something there and there is any help they can offer me, I'm willing to take the help, but I won't stand and fall with a diagnosis, because I manage my life. I
Mhm.
manage my job. I'm really good at my job. So I think that that gave me a lot of clues to, because I think that normally what you see before you when you think about somebody who has ADHD, it's the stereotypical, the fuck up, the one that can't manage anything, the one that always kind of drops the ball, doesn't ever succeed, might have lots and lots of issues in life, never manages to hold on to a job. I've never had any of those issues, ever. Of course, I didn't suspect anything, because that's not me. I I really, really succeed in whatever I take on, as long, and here comes the clue, as long as it interests me.
Yep. Yep.
So I think that that was kind of, thankfully, I'm also a person that gets really, really interested in and excited about stuff very easily.
Mhm.
So being a consultant suits me really, really well, because it means that I get to switch a job without switching a job, because
Mhm.
all of my customers come
Mm.
from different types of industries. But I also get to be like really nerdy about the weirdest things. And it excites me every single time, no matter what industry it is. It really excites me, and I
Mhm.
really go all in. So yeah, I
And when
think
you,
that basically the strategies is what kind of made me cope with all of this not fitting in, and that I perhaps feel a bit differently inside than how I'm perceived from the outside.
Mhm. Yeah. And you said going into the assessment, you're like,
Hmm.
if they can help me, of course I'll accept help, but if not, I'll be fine. I'm managing my life pretty fine. And of course, I'm sure they were able to offer you some small practical advice and things, but did you have an overall shift in how you viewed yourself by then going through that process and maybe relating with a lot of things?
I don't think I had a huge shift. It's more like, yeah, that explains everything.
Yeah.
Kind of like, the whole thing with not feeling that I fit in, feeling that I feel more comfortable in the company of adults, especially as a young adult, and that I perhaps just have a different way of looking at the world than others.
Mhm.
Mm.
And I think that for me, it was more like, cool, okay, now I know. It wasn't, and I don't think that it was really necessary for me, because I am successful in life. And I was successful in life before the diagnosis too.
Mhm.
So, and most of the strategies I had, because when they started to show me like, oh, these are different strategies that people with ADHD utilize, and I'm like, I already do all of these things.
Yes, this is very relatable. Yeah.
So for me, it wasn't really a big aha moment or anything. It was just that it was, there were some things that, like, for instance, the whole thing of big emotions. I feel emotions bigger than other people, and I have always done so. And it's not because I'm sensitive, but it is really because I either don't feel much about something or I feel all the feelings about it.
Mhm.
And that was nice to get an explanation for. And the same thing with the whole, like, why am I so obsessed with everything being just? And I mean, like, journalism, most people go into that profession wanting to make the world a better place. Why do we become designers? It's kind of
Sure.
the
Yeah.
same theme.
But how did you get
Yeah.
into journalism? Because you are at art school,
Oh, yeah.
and then where did that transition take place?
Oh,
Or
I
where did that?
refused to become a journalist because my oldest sister was a journalist.
Hmm.
And so, and for a moment, she was quite well known in Sweden because she was working in one of the big national radio channels for directed more to the young adults or younger audience. And there were so many people that wanted to be friends with me just because I was her sister. And I was like really fed up with being the sister. And one of the things I feared the most if I would become a journalist was that I would not get a job on my own merits, but because I had shared the same last name,
Ah,
which happens to be not so common in Sweden because it's Polish. Both my parents are Polish. My sisters were born in Poland. I'm the only one born in Sweden, but Madejska is not a very common last name. So I refused. I studied everything but journalism first when I started at university. I went through theoretical philosophy, behavioral sciences, personality and group psychology, cultural sociology, political science. And then finally one day I woke up and I was like, okay, so we're lucky to live in a part of the world where we can actually get a degree funded mostly by the government and take student loans, of course, but they are still very beneficial. But there's a limit to it. And if I want to be something when I grow up, perhaps it's kind of time. So I applied for anything I could kind of imagine myself working with, and one of them was journalism, and that's how it happened. But I did not go into radio. I decided that I would work within newspapers,
mm,
print, and I fell in love with page editing and making news readable to an
yeah,
audience.
right.
And I guess, like, I mean, the step from managing content on paper to managing content in digital channels
Mm,
as a designer, it's not really that big. And also, I
right,
started that transition already through my work at the newspapers. So
right.
all of that was kind of how it happened. And then actually, like with the transition to designer, from journalist to designer, there actually Adam Lawrence plays a part
He do.
because yeah, it's all his fault, just so you know.
We've talked to him
Um,
before. This
sorry, Adam.
fits the
Sorry,
experience.
Adam.
Yeah.
No, but his wife is one of my closest friends, and we are a group of girls that known each other for a very long time, and we happen to have even birthdays around the same year.
Yeah.
So we were visiting in Germany, and Adam was talking about his job and showing some of the stuff he does, and I was looking at it and I'm going like, but that's not far from what I do. And I was also miserable as a journalist at this point because the world of newspapers really changed, was no longer the same profession as when I started.
Mhm.
And I was really, really not happy with continuing as a journalist. So I came back from the trip to Germany, started looking for different educations actually to switch. And that's how I ended up actually doing another degree, or I kind of never finished the journalistic degree. Got a permanent job before I managed to get that final diploma. But then when I did the transition, I started to freelance as a designer, actually for the company where I'm hired now. And I did a bachelor's degree. at the same time. So I worked pretty much 100% while studying 100% for 3 years because I just decided I have to have the degree that goes with my new profession.
And
And
what
then
kind of
during the pandemic, I needed to do a master's because a girl has to have a hobby. So
that was my pandemic hobby. Nice.
Really? Wow. My
yeah,
God. So here I
now
am.
I'm not allowed to do any more degrees. There's a ban. My husband have said no more,
No
and
more degrees.
absolutely no PhD.
Aw.
Takes
Aw. Because that'd be so cool. I have no diplomas. I'm a school dropout. So there. And I have
See,
no ADHD and a school dropout. I feel really
I needed to be well into my 40s to actually get the degree. So here we are.
so cool. That's really cool.
and
So ADHD and not fitting in and it's kind of but being able to be kind of being hyper focused and all these things, how did they affect, I mean, now in hindsight, because now you kind of now you have the diploma for ADHD, in hindsight, what do you think, was it a blessing or a curse?
ooh.
No, I wouldn't be who I am without of all of the weird experiences I've had
Mhm.
in life because I am a bit impulsive and just throw myself into things without thinking sometimes.
Mhm.
I'm the one that kind of raises my hand and says, "Yeah, sure, I'll do it." And then afterwards I freak out because I have no idea how to do it.
Yeah.
But that's kind of me in a nutshell. I love doing that to myself for some odd reason. I hate that feeling when I feel completely out of control and I have no idea how to accomplish something that I have promised to do, but somehow I always deliver. And that is also kind of, an addictive feeling to
Mhm.
just,
Sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
be out of your comfort zone and in the end actually prevail somehow.
It's something that, because I mean, not being in your, I mean, if you never really fit it in, or at least always had that kind of feeling
Mhm.
of not fitting in, then I assume it's kind of easier to jump into some kind of topic or some
It's
kind of a
easy. It's
challenge.
easier. Yeah, no, I don't think it's easier because then you're doing it consciously.
Hmm. Yeah, but you're used to the feeling of
Yeah,
being a little lost.
yeah,
Where
perhaps.
other people, I
Mm,
mean, if you go through life with the feeling that you're totally comfortable with the system that you're part of and
mm.
everything that you feel. So actually, I have no clue how that feels. I'm hearing myself saying this. You're so comfortable being normal. Like, I don't know if that actually is a thing. Anyway, but suppose that is the thing. In my mind, there's people who
Mhm,
go like, yeah, you know, it's all good,
mm,
it's all
mm,
normal. I don't think that's really true, but as a typical thing, like, you're
mm,
comfortable and you take things for granted. These are the things they are. You never really
mm,
look for the discomfort because you don't like that. And you kind of,
mm,
these are, the linear thinkers or the people who would,
mm.
they would kind of go into panic mode. I mean, maybe you get stressed and like, oh, but there's still probably somewhere in your mind, somewhere in your head saying, I can fix this
Mm.
because you've been there before.
Yeah, yeah. I
Been there
think
before.
perhaps I have enough experience now of being great in a crisis.
Exactly. Yeah, of course. Yeah. But you have that experience
Yeah.
because it's part of your DNA is who you are. It's
Mm,
part of your
mm,
kind of the way you are. And so it's not something forced upon you per se. It's sort of that's how just how you operate. That's how you're wired. And
mm,
so I mean I would say and with all the interviews we've done, it's actually specifically with creative people, and I ran companies and I ran a design agency as a creative director with creative teams, and most creative, not all, but most creative people, there was something wrong with them. Well, all of them had
yeah.
something quirky. All of them had something that you go like, that's
Yeah.
odd, or because but those were the best because they thought differently and they
Mm.
saw things
Mm,
differently,
mm,
because they lived in a slightly different reality in a way. And so they could come up with solutions or thoughts or weird things. You go like, whoa, where did that come from? Right. So
Mm.
it's a superpower in that sense because you're wired differently than all the other people. And so my question would be, and if you look at your kind of, you as a child and growing up and in the world as we are now, because, the world is, I don't know if it's more chaotic than it used to be. I mean, if you're talking to my
And we are
grandparents.
more aware of how chaotic it is. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because we get kind of information,
Hmm.
everything is right here, right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So there's
Yeah.
this thing. So isn't this the world that, that is made for people like you?
Oh, sure it is.
Like you're the
But I've
like you're
actually
the only
also,
one that's like, yeah, I can fix this. I'm fine
I
with
can
this.
fix
Everybody
this.
goes
Yeah,
like,
no.
oh, panic. Everybody goes like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And you go like, yeah, you know, welcome in
Yeah,
my
I do believe that I might be a bit calmer about all of things with some people. But I especially right now, I guess, and this is perhaps where my big hyper focus within design comes in, I guess, with ethical technology
Mhm.
and ethical AI, which is really what I've spent the last, I don't know how many years on just digging into that topic. And of course, with the state of the world right now, I can clearly see how it came from, the way we've developed technology up until today, where we have a world in absolute turmoil. And I guess, especially for us who live in the Western world, who are suddenly exposed to the way we're used to the world looking like suddenly being upended, which I think is a bit of a shock to us who are used to be the privileged kind of group on the planet. But I can really see how technology really kind of allowed this to happen. And one of the core things that I like to talk about is what I call ethical debt in technology. And because I was talking about ethics with all of the developers I work with. So we are predominantly a digital engineering firm, which means that we work with design and development of softwares. So my design usually is directed at some form of software. And I could just see how we were like building on old technology, all of these new things who are speeding things up and accelerating things, but we're building it on technology that is already kind of faulty per se. And if the technology is not faulty, at least it causes us to collect data that is inherently faulty and biased. Because data is nothing else than like snippets of history that we collect. And that history is created by us humans, and we are by no means perfect. And I tried to talk about ethics, and everybody was like a bit uninterested in the topic. And then one day, like I remember it so vividly because I was sitting and I was trying to put words onto all of these feelings in two blog posts that I was writing. And suddenly I was like, but this is nothing else than the same thing as technical debt. It's just that it's ethical debt inside of our technology. And technical debt was something that all of the software engineers could relate to because they talk about that in the development of the products.
Can you
If
tell
you
me?
do not if you do not pay back your technical debt is basically what arises when you are in a hurry or you're just testing something and you don't build it in a technically sound way,
Mm.
but it will work.
Mhm,
But eventually you will have to go back and fix that
mhm.
Mhm.
because otherwise it will bite you in
Yeah.
the ass down the line. So technical debt is something that has to be repaid because otherwise the software will just not be as stable as it should be. And I was like, but it's the same thing with all of these ethical things. But nobody
Right.
in history of technology has ever gone back and paid back ethical debt. We just continued building on it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah.
So
And when you
now
say,
we're
Mhm.
here, and at this point in time, with social media, with algorithms and everything,
Mm,
just taking that ethical debt that existed from the very beginning and
mm,
just by maths and algorithms
yeah. Yeah.
amplified it.
Mhm, mhm.
Scary. I think that's really scary.
Scary.
Yeah, because it's also, and I'm not sure where we are at the moment, but I think it's even not so much in our control anymore,
Absolutely not.
right?
This
So,
is one of the big hot topics now, especially here in the EU, where we are trying to take a different path.
Mhm.
And one of the big things that we realized at the beginning of the year is, so where are all of the big data centers? Who owns that data? And
Mhm.
what soil is it stored? Who actually can regulate it? And I think that like the geopolitics of technology suddenly became a whole new arena that very few people have thought about. I'm fortunate enough to have a friend, Billy Lehtonvirta, who is a professor at Oxford and here at Aalto University in Helsinki, who has been thinking about these things. So I've been reading his research, but I think that right now we are all a little bit caught in the moment of, okay, so what are the alternatives? What if all of this disappears? If we can't use it? I
mm,
myself have started switching my personal private email to a provider that exists within Europe instead of using Gmail. I pretty much stopped using Meta's social media platforms. I haven't erased my accounts. I visit them randomly, not very often at all. And I think I will in the end up erasing them because I don't want to continue feeding that monster, sort of, that we have built. And that
is
has
that
led to
a,
this situation.
is that a larger trend? Because I mean, I read about this as well, and I recognize it in myself as well, that I go look for alternatives. So in the Netherlands, for instance, there's a big kind of shift going on for people who used WhatsApp, and then now they're going to Signal. And it was interesting because people started inviting me to Signal. I'm on Signal now. And I go like, what Signal? And also my wife said, what is that? Is that a European thing? And we looked into it. It said, oh no, it's also American. And we're like, nah, okay, that's
Mm,
not good. Isn't it like a European?
Mhm.
So, and then I started using Le Chat, the
yes,
French
Le Chat.
alternative, Le
Yes.
Chat, which is a great name. And I'm like, oh, this is
Hmm.
really cool. And it's actually pretty good. And so, and I also, and I'm not, I don't know anything about stock market, so I'm not that kind of person. But I was reading on this article where sort of also investors, small investors, and all kinds of investors are taking their money out of the American kind of market and started investing in
Mm,
European companies, just
mm,
because it's sort of, but that's kind
mm.
of, it's both, it's interesting, but it's also a bit, but like you go like, oh, that's not really, that is that going, is that we're not going the right way in a sense. It's a bit scary, but it is a trend, right? So I hear you
It
talking
is.
about it. So
Hmm.
there's this feeling of, oh, we now kind of have to take care of ourselves. So it's almost like, you know, Europe first, we're like, wait a minute,
Yeah,
that's
I
also a
think
bit,
that,
because who
but I
can we
think we,
trust those companies? I mean, can we trust
yeah.
European companies to go be ethical? Is that the path? Because aren't
So
these
at,
basically
at
the same
least
people?
the European technology is being regulated to a much
Okay.
higher
Mhm.
extent
Okay.
than what
Hmm.
American is.
Yeah.
And this is a big effort from the EU, and it is being rolled out gradually, but it is already much more regulated than the US.
Okay.
For instance, technically, we have much more protected privacy online, even on Facebook, than what Americans with American accounts have because of the GDPR.
Hmm.
So the EU has basically said that, well, we don't really quite believe that you will self-regulate, as the companies have been promising. And I think we can clearly see that they did not. And so I do believe that we will have a better situation in the EU. And here comes then the whole horde of people who are against regulation, who will say, but it will kill innovation. And my take on this is that no, it will not kill innovation. And as a person who loves art, who loves design, I know what happens if you tell somebody that here's a white paper, draw anything you like.
Mhm.
And then if you give them some constraints, you would probably see them drawing something much sooner.
Yeah. Isn't that the
Because
nature of
we do
innovation?
need constraints.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I think it's kind of odd. You like, we need to kind of be able to do anything we like because otherwise it kills innovation. Isn't innovation is the whole point of innovation not that you're doing
Mm,
something that seems impossible, is really difficult, you don't know what it's going to be. So because it's such
mm.
a new thing. So constraints are like, yeah, the whole thing is a constraint. I mean, so I also don't believe that. I think you get different kind of solutions. You get
Of
different,
course.
and that's what we want. That's why you regulate, because you want different solutions. No,
Of
but I
course.
was a bit annoyed with a Dutch company that they because they became really big and they became this billion-dollar company, and now they're moving out of the Netherlands because of all these regulations, and it stifles their growth and innovation, and they can't reward the people.
Mm.
That what actually they meant, is we can't fire people at will.
At will, yes.
That's
Yes.
basically what they said. And also then you have this guy who's, and I'm part of me is jealous because there's this young guy and he runs this billion-dollar. How did he possibly do that? So I'm kind of jealous at the same time, but I'm also thinking, like, you just want to be another Elon Musk. I mean, why?
Mm.
Why do you have to? Why do you need to grow more, 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 more? So there's also something wrong with, not just
But
our.
that is, yeah, well, like inherently at the foundation of all of this is that we have an economic system
Mhm.
that isn't quite suited for being very compassionate or empathetic or
Mhm.
ethical, especially not when it is no bars held, zero regulation kind of economic system.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that has happened in the US is that a lot of these safeguards around capitalism has been gradually, since Reagan's time, been changed in favor of companies.
Mhm.
And I don't really necessarily think that it has led to massively good things for humanity. It's led to lots and lots of good things for very few people who happen to sit at the top of these companies. And I don't really think that it is sustainable for us to grow indefinitely.
Mm-mm.
Like
Of
what's
course.
that? Like
Yeah.
literally, what's that?
It's
How's
impossible.
that going to look like? It's
Yeah.
impossible.
So we are at the
Um,
breaking point. Do you think we are at the breaking point? Is that because I think,
I
there's people who
think we
say,
definitely see signs of a breaking point.
hmm
I think it is interesting in a slightly terrifying way
Mhm. That was one of my
to
questions. How do you hang on to hope?
to look at all of this. But then again, I'm a person that thrives in a crisis. So
exactly. That's what I said. It's just, you're fine, but the rest of
I'm
us, we are all
fine.
really,
Yeah, no,
really nervous. You're like,
no.
no,
But I also
I'm.
don't want to I don't want to be a doomsday person because I've been working on AI products that
Yeah.
are absolutely amazing.
Did you read this
Uh,
book? It's called Hope. Sorry, I'm such a big fan of this book. It's called Hope for Cynics.
no, I
You
haven't
haven't
read
read
that. I
Hope for Cynics? Read Hope for
Oh,
Cynics
I need
because
to
it's
read Hope for
it
Cynics.
is about critical
Yeah.
thinking, and it is about, you can be critical, but
Yeah.
if you become cynical, then then there's no hope, right?
Oh,
So you
yeah.
can be
Yeah.
optimistic and critical at the same
Yeah.
time. So,
Mm,
but it's wonderful. It's a really optimistic book. So I actually,
mm.
it made me feel a little bit more optimistic,
Oh,
which is
that's good. Perhaps I
yeah.
need, well, I'm quite optimistic anyway.
Yeah, but it will elevate your optimism even
Yeah.
more. You go like, No, but it gives you language of also to
Yeah.
for
Mm,
yourself and others, where you go,
mm,
yeah, okay, right, there's some
mm.
stories. Yeah, but
Yeah, no, but I do believe that we can do something absolutely amazing with all of the technology we have developed. I've worked on
exactly.
amazing artificial intelligence that helps medical experts
Yeah,
in fields where there is a lack of medical experts to
Mm.
get AI assisted diagnosis tools, and
exactly.
which speeds up diagnosis, meaning people will get an earlier cancer diagnosis.
Mm.
The clear cases can quickly be just confirmed, whilst the medical experts then get time to invest on those really, really difficult cases where it's not a clear case. And they can spend their time on that instead, rather than spending all of their time on all of the cases. So I know that we can leverage this for the good of humanity, but we need to find ways of doing it in a more purposeful and meaningful way. Right now, like the way we're using AI and tossing it around and sprinkling it in all of the products, that is not the way to go. I really do believe that we need to find more purpose and meaning in applying the technology. And I also believe that we need to learn in the industry, but also perhaps already at the research stage at universities, to do a lot more forecasting when it comes to
Mm.
technology.
Mhm.
Because right now we don't spend much time thinking about this amazing thing that I'm trying to accomplish. What could this do in the hands of somebody with malicious intent?
Mm. Yeah,
Mhm.
Because a lot of the stuff that's gone wrong is because people have developed things with the best intention in mind, but they have never imagined that one person with malicious intent and how they could utilize the same technology.
yeah, that's
So
the
that is like something I spend a lot of my time on,
mm,
trying to figure out how can I make teams do more forecasting and think a bit before they deploy
right.
this technology and release it into the world.
I remember Christina Anderson, who from Finland. She was part of the conference I organized many years ago, design thinking conference, and she talked about AI. And this is a long time ago, but she said we should become better humans first,
Mm,
because we have to make, AI technology should be our friend, but it actually means that we have to become better people,
mm.
because
Mhm.
then we will develop better
Better
technology.
AI. Yeah.
And that is
Yeah,
that is a big, I don't know, that's a
that
big
is
task.
true. But we're also feeding the AI all of the biased
Yeah,
data
exactly.
produced by
Yeah,
us
yeah.
that we have collected for decades.
Yeah, that's an
Mhm.
interesting.
Um,
Yeah, exactly. So even in, the history, what you call the debt that we have,
mm.
we haven't been repaying that, and
Yeah,
basically
so
just
even if we
using.
become better today,
Yeah,
we still need
we're
all of that
screwed.
data. We still need all of
Yeah.
that data
Yeah,
to train the AI. And we haven't really been all that good throughout history.
yeah,
Not historically, no. And
No.
speaking of forecasting made me think, of course, I'm very curious what your forecast looks like, but I'm also more interested if somebody gave you a magic wand and said this could be the reality for everyone in terms of AI and how we're using it, what would that wish look like for you in 15, 20, 30 years? Or maybe
Oh,
even way
wow.
sooner?
So there's this brilliant book called Atlas of AI, written by a very smart woman, Kate Crawford.
mm,
And it goes over pretty much the whole kind of system that needs to exist for us to be able to have AI, from extraction of minerals to factories, data, and everything, and like producing the devices that we host AI in.
Mhm.
And we're wreaking a lot of havoc on the planet to have AI to begin with. Right now, I think the last number I saw that was between 2021 and 2023, I believe, that Microsoft increased their energy consumption by 30%. And then we have the fact that every time you have a conversation with any kind of AI chat tool that is between 20 and 50 questions, you could dump out like half a liter of water on the ground. That's how much water that evaporates for those 20 to 50 questions. And I think that this is kind of something that illustrates the whole problem with AI, and I think in general with this whole ethical debt thing, the injury, the harm we are causing, it's invisible to people. And it's kind of like, when somebody says you're depressed and the reply is, oh, but you look so happy.
Yeah.
We have a hard time believing the things we cannot see. And I guess that my wish for the future would be that we would find ways of showing people the actual cost of technology in one way or another. If a medical doctor has to amputate the leg of a patient and amputates the wrong leg, we can see that. The whole medical industry at its beginning had no regulation. Today they have lots of regulation. It's for a reason. Journalists, I come from a profession that had ethical guidelines because they have power in the world. They can influence society. Technology influences our lives so much more, and there is so little regulation. And the one place in the world where there actually exists a nice, decent amount of regulation, which is still very small or very little regulation, is the EU. It's a technology, like it's changing our lives at a scale that hasn't been seen since the Industrial Revolution. Another great book, by the way, Blood in the Machine, which kind of compares the Luddite movement and what's happening today. And the Luddites were actually not against the machines. I think people forget that quite easily. We haven't solved the fundamental issue of how people are going to make a living and survive if AI replaces as much of the professions that is currently predicted. Now, I think that a lot of it is hype. I don't see the current AIs working as well as they should for being capable of replacing us just yet. But of course, it's the direction we're heading in. But we still haven't solved these fundamental issues of society that will really disrupt a lot of things for us. And we're just continuing running headfirst. I'm not entirely certain that this is a good thing. And I love technology. Technology has done so much good for us, and it can do so much good for us. So we need to start understanding what harm it does, visualize it for people, make it available in a different way, because otherwise people will continue. We will do a lot of stupid things for convenience as humans. We will throw away our privacy as long as we don't have to remember a phone number or anything, like having to fill out a form. It's so much better if Google just does it for you. And I think that is also kind of like one of the most powerful images that I use when I talk about ethics in AI and technology as a public speaker is a photo of a person in front of a computer with a lot of journalists behind their back, filming, microphones, lights, everything pointing at this person in front of a computer screen. I wish people could literally see that in front of themselves every time they sit down by a computer, because you're never alone in front of your computer.
That's a scary thought. But
That's why that image is so powerful.
Yeah, exactly. No,
Yeah.
you're so right. Yeah.
And this is why
But we don't want to know. It's not that we.
Yeah.
It's also
Yeah.
something we don't want to know because it's going to make things more difficult.
Yeah.
And our
Mhm.
brains just don't like to do more work because it's already doing a lot of work. So if we can
Mm,
take something away, some task, some worry, something,
mm,
we'll take the easy road if
mm,
we have the option. It takes more effort, and it takes a really big crisis, a disaster for people to
mm,
really really change. I mean, I think that's also something we've learned from history. We'll just
mm.
go along until there's a huge disaster, and then we go like, oh, we have to change everything we do, and then all of a sudden, there's people doing stuff. But
Mhm.
so, I
But
mean,
see, Arne, here we're back to that thing with the movement of people moving out of social media and moving to
yeah.
other providers for personal email and starting to think. I think that people have started to realize how much we have been relying on
Mm-hmm.
American technology, and we cannot take it for granted anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that that is the big crisis, but I think that this is kind of one small awakening, at least among a certain group of people.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, of course, it also requires you to be interested in technology enough to even know that this is all going on. And
Sure.
of
Yeah.
course, I'm surrounded by engineers all day long, so I'm hyper aware, of course, also
Yeah.
with being so interested in this topic. But I definitely do see that that movement is currently happening, and that we have this need to think about right now. What will we do if we don't have it? What are the alternatives? What are our options?
Yeah, I'm slightly well. I mean, especially I my kids. They're growing up in this world, and it's actually one of the first times in my life that I actually because I was never really that worried about their future. I mean, maybe global warming was a little bit like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, that's such a big thing that I wasn't
Mm,
going to kind of worry about that every day. But there are moments right now where I go like, oh shit, this is this might really affect my kids.
Mhm.
yeah.
So that's fascinating. And I think so, at least I think we should teach kids, adults, anyone really, critical thinking, asking questions. No, don't take things for granted. Look at
Mm,
what exactly is it? What is this? How is it made? Where does it come from? And
mm,
and not take things for granted. And I think that is such a big task in its own, on its own, because I mean,
it is.
what technology now does, like ChatGPT, is actually taking away critical thinking because it gives you answers, and
Yes.
it's always great, it's always wonderful, and you say thank you very much, ChatGPT,
Mm,
and it is
mm,
like, yeah, you're welcome, I'm here to help you, and you're like, okay, and it's so, it's easy and pleasant, and I see that with my kids, and
mm,
and so we really have to teach them like, wait, no, wait, don't take these
mm,
things for granted. Where
Mhm.
does this come from? Where did that
mm.
answer
Are
come
you
from?
sure that the output
Exactly.
actually is true?
And if
Have you
it's true,
double checked it?
yeah, did you
Yeah.
double check it? Where did it come from? And how does that thing actually work that you're talking to and thinking it's your friend?
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Where does it
Yeah.
come from? Who owns this?
Mm,
If
Mhm.
especially if it's free, right? And you
mm,
go like,
Yep.
if it's free, you're like, oh, wait a minute, it's where someone's making money of what you just put in there. How does that work?
exactly.
You're the
Yeah.
product. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you,
Well,
you know,
I mean, again, Kate Crawford, same book, Atlas of AI. One of the big questions she asks that is also one of my favorites is technology is not neutral. We have to ask ourselves, what are we optimizing? Who are we optimizing it for? And now I don't remember the third one because I'm talking to you. I'm not trying to like sound smart. And here I am, not remembering anything.
well, you gave us one really good.
Who gets to decide, which is, of course, the absolutely most important one? Who gets
Mm.
to decide what we are developing
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
how it is optimized
yeah.
and for whom? So there was a long time when we were talking about the design thinking moved towards product, which I absolutely loathe, and it in that same time also came this outcome thinking, and I'm always going like, yes, outcome, but whose outcome? Who gets to decide what is the good outcome? Is it the person on the receiving end, or is it the business people?
Mm,
No,
yeah.
we want great outcomes of our services that we are designing, but who gets to decide what is a good outcome?
What are
Because
you,
then
what?
it's also the person that decides what gets developed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you. By the way, thank you for the books, because I really sort of Atlas
I've
of
written them all down.
yeah,
Yes.
Atlas of AI. I'm gonna I didn't know that book exists, and that's something I because that actually I hope it's also something I share with my kids, because so there's this book. It is it's made. There's a Dutch designer artist. She made this book about sort of everything that is being made by the pigs, or not by, they're not made by pigs, but by whatever they take from pigs. We know pigs, in sausages,
Yeah.
but
Mm.
Hmm.
it's in everything. So she made this
Yes.
book, and it's a beautiful book, and every page has a product or something that is made from a pig produce, something. And it's amazing. It's in everything. So I mean, you go through it, you go like, wow, if you're like a Muslim, it's going to be really difficult because it's in everything,
Mhm.
so it's amazing. I hope the Atlas of AI has something like visual like that. You go like, wow, this is all these things need to be kind of in place, because I think also
Mm.
me as a visual person and having dyslexia. Did I tell you I have this? Did I mention that at all? Because anyway, so I mean, right? So having that as sort of you remember there's also these pictures where someone takes like a car apart, and all the little bits and the screws and the little
Hmm.
bits are kind of in one image.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I
so
want to.
you're gonna love this. It's not in the book, but it exists as a PDF online, and I can send you the link, Arne. But Kate Crawford, together with, name slips my mind right now. Anyway, they took apart an Amazon Echo Dot into all of the bits and pieces and describes everything from the human and societal impact all of the parts have. It's like a giant map. I think it was part of the Ars Technica exhibition at some point. I know
Yeah.
that they have it at MoMA in New York, and I believe at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London.
This is amazing. For anybody listening, you can Google or not, use your preferred provider.
Yeah. No,
Anatomy,
Google. We just said so.
Yes,
Hang on.
the
Wait a minute.
anatomy.
anatomy of .ai, and it shows it's all visual. This is so cool.
It
Oh,
is amazing. Amazing. I wish I had been there at the museum and seeing it on this giant wall where it was presented. I would have stayed there for hours.
yeah. I love those things. Okay, that's awesome. Wow. Okay, cool. Because that's really important. That kind of links to what you were saying. Like, if people can just see it, right? And you go like, oh, that's so confrontational, but you at
Mhm.
least you know it. And in a way, art, you know, it's
Mm,
although, and this is why, it's always in these moments in time that people go like, oh, art, we shouldn't subsidize
mm,
those people. But actually that's a
mm.
that's a
Yeah.
sign where you go like, oh, I think this is the time art is becoming more important, and maybe a little too
Yeah,
important.
Yeah.
yeah. And that's why I also like to use speculative design, which is
Yeah,
kind of like using design as an
exactly.
art
Yeah,
form,
of course. Totally.
uh,
Yeah.
for that forecasting that I was talking about, and utilizing that by allowing people to design evil things.
Yeah. So if you look at what's next for you, what are you most excited about for what is
Oh,
next?
wow. What am I most excited about? I'm excited about so many things.
You can only choose one thing. You can't be.
I can only choose one
It's an
thing.
Can only be
impossible
excited.
task.
Impossible. Absolutely
I just,
impossible.
yeah.
Actually, I really have trouble answering this question because at the same time as So I'm really excited about a lot of things. They're all like small, tiny bits of things,
Right.
because for the first time in a year or so, I'm not so busy doing public speaking and interviews that I actually have time to just design.
Ah,
And
okay.
right now, I'm actually designing, and I am very happy that I have time to just design, even though I love the ethics of technology and AI and everything technology. I am absolutely thrilled that I have some time to just be a designer as well.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you so much. We could have talked for way longer, but we have
Way
to go.
longer.
Yeah. Next time.
Next
But
time.
yeah, thank you so much for
Yeah. Thank you, Anika.
Thank you, guys.
Always inspiring. Yeah.
I always feel like I'm going to sound like an idiot, and I'm going to be afraid for like forever before the episode is out, that I sound like an idiot and that I made an idiot of myself.
You don't know.
No,
But
nothing.
that's
No.
me. Like that literally comes
So
back to the
interesting.
whole thing we
Yeah,
talked about,
I know.
insecurities and everything.
It is
Like,
so interesting how that works.
Mhm.
Being so comfortable, being you and being, you actually, because
yes,
that's also what you said. And at the same time being so so afraid of
so
what other people
neurotic
think.
about sounding like a moron.
Yeah, it was like, yeah, no. Thank you so much. It was an honor. And Blood in the Machine, Atlas of AI,
Hope for
um,
cynics.
Hope for Cynics. Yeah. It's
Hope for
very
Cynics is
important.
on my list.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Atlas of .ai. There you go.
yeah, Atlas of AI. Awesome.
Anatomy of AI, it was. Anatomy of AI.
Oh,
I
sorry. Yes.
believe.
Anatomy of
Yes.
.ai.
I have to edit that out. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
yeah, no. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, last book tip: Cloud Empires
Cloud
by Vili
Empires.
Lekton Virta. Cloud Empires.
Cloud Empire. Why? Why Cloud Empire?
Because it is about how these giant corporations became giant tech, how they grew into it, and what we can do about it. But this book is now, of course, a little bit on the old side, but his new research is like super interesting, that goes into the
Listen,
geopolitics of.
sometimes you read something from years ago. By the way, old books are like, this is a very old book. It's for 2019. And you're like,
Yeah. No,
like that's
Cloud Empires. That's why I'm still like, because Cloud Empires really go to the bottom of history with big tech, where they came from, really, how they developed,
yeah.
and why the functionality that we see in them today exists.
But
Um,
sometimes it's really good to read books that are. I mean, sometimes I can't remember the title, but I was reading a book from it's a few years ago, but it was from the 90s. And actually, if sometimes you read something that is you might call old, but they tell you something where you go, oh, they already knew. Oh, because
yes,
sometimes you
yes.
think that what's happening right now, you're like the only kind of people that
Mm.
are aware and that it's happening, and it's been happening for a long time. These things have been
Mm-hmm.
predicted by people, they've been
Mm,
seen by people. That too is so
mm,
good to know. Like, no,
mm,
this is not,
mm.
you're not special,
Yeah.
because
And if you have dyslexia and you want to know more about why this whole data brokers thing is a horrible thing,
mm.
there's an excellent episode. It actually exists on YouTube as well. Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. Data brokers is the episode,
All right, I
and
follow
that
him.
is absolutely brilliant.
Cool. Okay. Data workers.
Full of good sources and good
Oh,
insight.
all of my talks, whenever I do public speaking, always comes with a list of things to watch, things to
Yeah,
listen
yeah,
to, and things to read.
Goodie bag, yeah.
yeah. All right. Okay. You got to stop. Stop it.
Okay,
Stop
we have to
it.
stop.
Stop it now. All right. Thank you. Stopping the recording.